It's, oh, I know it was really that philosophy session, Socrates and mediation was lovely. And I'm really looking forward to this one. And we're going to continue that philosophy and mediation discussion and all these interesting things that you've been doing. This is something that you had posted about the Aryans and all that. I think that also we need to have discussions on. So thank you, Federico. And your voice is not there. We are.
Yeah, because these headphones are new, and actually maybe I should just take them off. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, but that was better when you had used them earlier when we were in Gabriela's session. It was actually better.
Okay, so let's just wonder why they're not working, because okay, there is always some technical problems, you know. Let me just try again. Is it working now?
It is, yeah. But are you speaking through that? You're not speaking through that, I think. No, it's not. No. Why would that be? Because when you said hi to us, was it through this or was through the other one? Because I am lip reading. I am lip reading right now.
Okay, it was the other one, so I'll take it off. This is new, you know, so this is the first time I'm trying it.
No, I tell you what has happened. I tell you what has happened is in the Zoom, when you have you have the mic, just click that arrow, the up arrow, and select this headphone. What is happening? It's selected the other headphone. So
okay.
Just put it in. Just put it in, and then just select that headphone.
Let me try them.
So in that next to the mic,
and this way.
Yes, it's okay.
Is it working now?
Yep,
okay.
Yep, it's working now.
Okay, we needed some, you know, thrilling moments just to start with this enormous theme. Okay, just to make sure about a couple of things. I'm not expert of theology. I'm a philosopher of law. I'm a mediator. I'm a lawyer. But I must tell this. I have a passion for theological arguments, but from a philosophical viewpoint. And of course, I'm a believer. So just to make it honest and clear, I'm a Christian, I'm a Catholic. I was born in a Catholic family. So I have to be quite clear about this background of mine. I will tell you something more later on. I haven't always been a believer. So there is always a time in life in which you just get away a little bit from faith and you just return. And that was also my case. Which is strange because what made me return was also thanks to philosophy. Usually it's the opposite. Philosophy takes away from faith. In my case, it was just showing me that those roots needed to be rediscovered and, in a sense, evaluated from a more adult viewpoint. So this is just to be quite clear about my perspective with its limitations and peculiarities. And also, I will be quoting something from the Bible and the Gospel, but I don't have the English translation. So it will be my translation from the Italian Bible of Jerusalem. So in that case, the mistake is all mine. So in case I make some mistakes with the translation.
But Federico, you know, you're a lawyer. That
word,
each word matters. Okay, each word matters. The interpretation matters. Everything. So you have to take us through that also.
Of course, but I bear the responsibility of that. So I just wanted to make this sort of frame clear. So, well, the theme mediation and Christian ethics, that's an enormous theme. But I will start with two questions that I also asked to myself these days, when I was preparing a bit these reflections that I want to share with you. And the first question is, how can Christian ethics or Christian spirituality, which is not the same thing, of course, you can be, in a sense, agreeing with Christian ethics without adopting a Christian spirituality. But in a sense, let's take them together now. How can they contribute in the reflection and in the practice of mediation? First question. But there is also a more radical question, which is the second. Is a Christian viewpoint compatible with being a mediator? Isn't there a contrast between them? Or can there be contrast between being a mediator, a conflict mediator, and being Christian? Well, we must start from here, because otherwise I should just stop and say, okay, either I need to separate those parts of my life. So or there is some internal contradictions that I'm not dealing with. In any case, from a common sense level, there are, of course, some features of Christian ethics that sound really compatible with mediation. Well, the care and attention to the other, which is one of the elements that characterize frequently the Christian argumentation style also, you know. And think of, on the other hand, the frequent also political appeal to peace, to nonviolence. I mean, especially between Pope Benedict XV at the beginning of World War I, and now to Pope Francis during the situation that we have in Ukraine, you know. So such a constant appeal to peace, to pacifying conflicts, to not recurring to violence. And to quote another very famous example, who does not know about Saint Francis mediating between the town of Gubbio and the wolf, the animal that was threatening and bringing fear to the whole community. And that was a win-win solution at the end, because when Francis decided to talk to the wolf, they met an agreement. So this wolf would protect the community of Gubbio and be protected and nurtured by those people. So that was a kind of mediation between a part of nature, an animal in this case, and that community. But this is such an interesting metaphor of mediating between the other that threaten us and this other that can become part of our system, in a sense, if we mutually recognize each other. So there is lots of food for thought in this, but we can also find and meet some objections that, to me, need to be addressed first before I go on. And at an ethical level, of course, when I'm saying Christian, I am aware that there are lots of different denominations. So probably this affects more the Catholic side, but not absolutely the Catholic side. But let's say that Christian ethics rely also on a normative framework that doesn't always help to mediate, and surely in many fields doesn't accept too many compromises. Of course, I'm also aware that compromise and mediations are not synonyms, of course, but in a sense, this normative structure that has some also quite clear rules, in a sense, isn't that a bit in a friction with the idea of a mediation that creates new norms, create new balances between parties without possessing a certain rule? And of course, the second matter is quite close to that. It is from an epistemic, from a metaphysical level, there is a big issue in the whole Christian doctrine connected with the truth. In postmodern times, like the ones that we are living in, especially in the Western world, truth is quite a dividing idea. And it is really easy that if you talk about the truth, you are labeled as intolerant, because in a sense, you're saying that there is a truth and that you can have it, or you can reach it, in a sense. And of course, if you believe in a religion in which God says, I am the truth, this is a problem, because what happens to the others? So is that compatible with an idea in which you have also to open to other viewpoints, to mediate maybe between them? So it seems that both this normative structure and this approach to the truth are telling us that there are situations that are not win-win at all. There is not just and. There are situations in which it's either or. And so you need to judge, to decide, to evaluate in a sense that does not allow a win-win outcome. And also Jesus said that. I'm quoting from Matthew 10:34. I came not to bring peace, but sword, to divide And there is a long list, father from son, and so on and so on. Jesus, a divider, isn't that the devil? From the Greek, diaballo, diavolo, diabolon, the divider is the devil. Why Jesus is dividing? What does that mean? I came to bring sword and not peace. In a sense, also in our celebrations, I give you my peace during the Eucharistic celebration. What does that mean? A peace with the sword or without a sword? This is an underlying question that I will leave to the conclusions. But of course, if we project this normativity and this approach to truth also within the legal framework, of course, an idea of truth implies an idea of judgment, and in a sense, a win-lose situations. So here's my challenge: to question the issues of normativity and truth, and to try and understand if and in which terms these ideas are compatible with the perspective of mediation. And if so, how can they contribute to the heart, soul, but also to the work of a mediator? Well, and to start questioning the idea of normativity, I will take maybe the most normative and legal part of the Old Testament. So something that we share with Hebrews, but that is also in common with the three big revealed religions, you know, which is the Ten Commandments. Of course, we all know that we have two different versions of them. One is in the book of the Exodus 20, 1:17, and the other one is in the Deuteronomy 10. Basically, if you just read those pages, this is just a list of orders and prohibitions. Do not commit homicide, do not, and do. So this is something that has quite a normative structure. There is something that is prohibited and something that you have to do. So there's a list of rules given from above. We will see it apparently written on stone. So that's quite a strong image, but we will see whether this image is the definitive one. And of course, it is not something that you need to discuss. You just have to obey. This is also a common sense idea of these 10 commandments. But is that the idea? Well, let's wait a little bit. But if we take this idea, we can easily match it within the frame of legal studies, this normocentric, formalistic, imperativistic idea of law, with the abstract, general, and imperative idea of normativity that we find, for instance, in legal positivism, especially in civil law countries rather than in common law countries, but not only. So the idea that law is basically made of orders and prohibitions, and that these prohibitions and order are valid and effective because if you don't obey to them, there is a sanction. Full stop. So whenever a conflict happens, you just have to restore that order, possibly through a legal judgment that re-enables the force of law, especially in criminal matters, that has been violated, and restores that order. In a sense, an eye for an eye, to quote the Bible once again. Yes, but this is quite a naive and superficial reading of that peculiar text. It's decontextualized. So what we do, both as lawyers and as readers of a text, that you can read also in a law and literature form, so with much respect for the religious element, but without the need to be involved in your own faith in that. Well, that text assumes a completely different meaning if you put it in that context. And the context is, yes, of course, it has been written between the 5th and the 6th century before Christ, but it's part of a wider narrative that is part of a oral tradition that goes back to, say, 1,000 years before Christ, and even later, and even probably to an older time. And of course, we all know how interpretation is important. And what I would try to suggest now is to provide us with some elements, some sort of conceptual cornerstones that might help us reread those pages in a way that provides us with a different meaning. And of course, I have my sources here. From the law and literature perspective, I'm quoting from Francois Host, who wrote lots of things about law and literature matters, even including also this part of the alliance between God and Moses. So the law that has been given to the Hebrews. There is a big influence also in my reading from authors that influenced also the world of restorative justice, like Howard Zehr, who's one of my mentors. There is a whole part of his book, Changing Lenses, in which Howard takes into account this reading of the biblical justice. And of course, I'm also quoting from Christopher Marshall. And also in the world of the reflection on criminal law, a wonderful book by a German theologian, Eugen Wisnet, Die verratene Versöhnung, The Lost Reconciliation, is a critic about the Old and New Testament vision of crime and justice. And of course, the other source from inside the Christianity, which is my main source. I mean, whenever I want to be clear in what Christianity is, that is my source, and is Joseph Ratzinger, who later became Pope Benedict XVI. So just to be quite clear in who my sources are. And these are, of course, not all Christians and not all Catholics, but this is what I came up with. Well, let's introduce these 4 elements, interpretive elements, that can help us read the 10 commandments. And of course, commandments is not the right word. In Greek, it's dekalogos, so the 10 discourses, maybe. So already this issue with the translation gives a hint that maybe we're not dealing with orders, but more with a dialogue, maybe. But these 4 elements are the concept of liberation, the idea of the broken tablets, the idea of covenant, so the alliance between God and his people, and the concept of shalom connected to the idea of justice as tzedakah. So these 4 elements, which I will reread. This is just to say what these elements are. Well, before we get to the moment in which the Hebrews received the law, why did they and how did they came to that point? Did they come to that point? Well, they were, we all know, in captivity in Egypt, probably not at the beginning like slaves, but in that moment they were living like slaves. And what is the order, the kind of legal and political order? Well, the pyramids provide us with the image that describes that situation. There was a very large base of people that were almost like servants or slaves, and an edge in which the pharaoh was basically a man, but also provided with a divine nature. So self-divinized in a sense. So to them, the pharaoh was God. That order, as the pyramid is not a movement in movement, is static. It's highly hierarchical. There is a hierarchy, and it uses also religion to sustain that fact that this order is not to be changed. And the Hebrews were suffering at the time, and so there is this man who has this meeting with God in a way that is, in a sense, God works in mysterious ways, you know. And so this fire burning on a bush while he's working as a shepherd around and this fire is not really consuming the bush. And this is there is an interesting hint. Don't walk here. This is a sacred ground. Take your shoes off. So you are in front of something that goes beyond your possibility of understanding. So wait, stop. There is an otherness provoking you. So you have to move beyond your schemes. And who are you? I am who I am. And this is the first answer. And that's interesting. I am who I am. This means you don't even try to define me. I am beyond. And of course, the second, yes, but you have a name, of course. How can I call you? And naming something or somebody in the Hebrew in culture was possessing the nature of something. So no, you don't have my name. I am the one who was with you, with your fathers, your forefathers, with Abraham, Isaac, and so on and so on. What does that mean? I have always been with you. I'm walking with you. I'm in your story. And this leads us to a word that connects God with a word that is plural. It's the plural that has no singular, and that's interesting. Elohim. We are with you. I are, in the sense, I are instead of I am with you. So it is an otherness that, in a sense, is present and walks with you through history. So it's an otherness that is not absent. Yes, of course, but how can I go back to my people and say that you are inviting me to help to save them through your might, of course? Well, you can say that I am has mercy of his people and will send you to help them being liberated. And what is interesting is that Moses doesn't start a rebellion, a revenge, or a violent thing. He goes to the Pharaoh and asks for freedom as a right, which is, in a sense, an act of mutual recognition. I recognize that you are in charge of this legal order, but you have to recognize to me my right of being a free man and to have my people being set free from slavery. And we all know that this created lots of problems and so on, until, with the help of God, these people could escape Egypt and what? And go through the desert. 40 years of problems through the desert. So we know what they leave, which is the safe space, in a sense, of slavery under that order, which is clear and not to be modified, in a sense. And their movement is towards a promised land, but they don't reach it immediately. Even Moses will never see the promised land, only from very far away. He won't get there. So there is a movement. And this is also interesting because before receiving the law, they need to nominate judges. And this is an important image. Also, these people that are crossing the desert, that are moving from somewhere to somewhere else, well, they can have conflicts, and they need to find somebody to help them solve their conflicts. So the issue of solving conflicts comes before having a law, in a sense of having norms. And that's quite a powerful image. And then finally, there comes the time in which God tries to interact directly with the people. And of course, there is an issue, in a sense, of translation between this absolute that has no name and the people whose mindset has to change completely, because they were used to another idea of religion, to another idea of God, to another idea of law, and what? So they need the prophet Moses to become a mediator and go up to the mountain and meet God and receive the law. So 40 is another important element. Moses goes to the mountains and receives the law, which is, in a sense, in this part of the text, given from above. So it's received. And what happens when he comes back? Well, the Hebrews were, in a sense, afraid. they need to go back to their safe space. And they were thinking, well, this prophet brought us in the middle of a desert and we have no news of him for 40 days. And God, he's disappeared. I mean, his silence is deafening. Let's create an idol. Let's cast all the gold that we have and create a golden veil that will march in front of us. This is, and once again, the idol is divinizing something that is quite human. So let's create an artifact that we can provide with being divine, but because we define it as being provided with that quality, which is idolatry, of course. And we keep doing it with many elements in life: money, power, sex, whatever you call it. Idols are always there. And of course, Moses comes back with the tablets and finds that they're honoring, adoring the golden veil. And what happens to the tablets? Few Christians read that page. He breaks them. Moses breaks them. And of course, I asked to my students the other day, why? And we have many theories. He was angry and broke the tables. Of course, it could be. Or they had broken a promise, and so the tablets need to be broken. I give you my interpretation. I'm not saying that the other have no meaning. They are quite likely, I mean, but mine is that if these people are in that mindset to create idols, and if I give them a law that is written in the stone, it's carved in the stone, they will transform this law into an idol. They will have idolatry for the law, which is one of the biggest issues with every revealed religion, to have the idolatry of the law, which means the possession of the right rule for every situation. And of course, every lawyer listening here knows that also without the religious world, also in the legal world, we can have idolatry for the law. Any times that we see laws and procedures as more important than human relationships, that human problems, then those issues that in mediation we try to solve, and that procedures sometimes grind and destroy because it's not procedurally justified. So that's a powerful image also for us mediators every day. But what happens? The tablets are broken. And this is also another important image. Not all revealed religions are clear in explaining that we receive something from God, but we are the ones who are writing. So when we say word of God, we Christians, we say that it's inspired by God, but it's not written by God. This means that we bear the responsibility of its interpretation. And so nobody can say this is what God wants in a way that it's definitive. This is idolatry. This is my opinion, of course. But to me, in the Christian viewpoint, the message is quite clear. There is no translation of God's will into a set of rules. It's your responsibility to try to write with your limited and human resources. And that's exactly what Moses does. Listen, God, we are in the middle of the desert. You say them. They're stubborn, I know, but they're just learning what being free means. So listen, I will build a tent here in the desert and invite you inside. And we will negotiate. And that's powerful. And this is the second image, the covenant. This law is not given from above. It's coming out from an alliance, from a dialogue between God and the prophet. And the text is quite clear. God talks to Moses like man to man. Inside the tent is the sacred. Every nomadic tradition knows what the tent means in terms of safe space, hospitality, providing the sacred space for the host and for the guest. But we also know that this is not a permanent place. So you have to recreate it, restate it from time to time. It's not your permanent house. And this time, of course, the law won't be written on stone. It will be the famous papers that the Jews would also bring to Jerusalem. So it's no longer written in that way. But what is most important is that it's negotiated. Of course, you will say it's not a normal negotiation. It's asymmetric. There is God on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have a prophet and the people. Yes, it is. And in a sense, it looks like a sort of alliance between a local landlord, that's what Francois also suggests, and their people. But it is no mandatory unless you are willing to apply that. So to start learning the freedom, you need to decide that you want that law, and that's an alliance. So it's something that you have to agree upon. You have to agree, God and Moses, to negotiate it, and to agree in the end that this will be an alliance. So it will never be there unless you are willingly paying your, giving your consent to that. And so this idea of covenant shows that maybe it is quite naive to think that from above this law was received. And what is the alliance actually there for? Oh, well, all the Old Testament has a constellation of alliances, of covenants. Abraham, Noah, whatever. An alliance was needed anytime that the harmony was broken. Harmony between God and human beings, among human beings, between human beings and the creation. So that harmony is the shalom. The same common root with salam in Arab, shalom. And shalom is not a static order. It is a situation of correct relationship between that otherness that God is, but it is a relational otherness between human beings and among human beings, but also involving the creation. If you go back at the covenant of Noah and the Ark of Noah, whatever, it was clearly showing that human beings had to bear the responsibilities for animals, for the environment, and whatever. And isn't that up to date for us right now? We're always talking about environmental sustainability, and I mean, look back at the Genesis, and the theme was already there. But the shalom shows also that the idea of justice is never absorbed into applying rules. Justice as tzedakah is exactly justice as a correct relationship. And of course, you are part of that relationship, and you bear the responsibility of your own part of the road towards meeting the other. As the Hebrew philosopher Martin Buber, that has influenced so much my studies, once you meet somebody, there's your part of the way and his or her part of the way. And that's mysterious for both of them. You don't know. But there you come to meet the other person. And then it's up to you to decide whether you meet somebody that you can call you, thou, du in German, or as it, as an object. So that's your own responsibility. Are you meeting with someone or with something? Because that is your personal choice. So. If we take all these four elements and go back to the text of Exodus, of Deuteronomy, basically there is always a premise. I am the God who set you free from the slavery in Egypt. So, and this is not an order, neither a prohibition. This is to me, it's the main premise. You were a slave, now you are free. If you want to keep being free, I will tell you 10 or more, they are more than 10 actually, discourses that are examples of how to preserve your responsible freedom. If you are free, you will never become a slave of idols. You will never become a slave of work, a workaholic, as we say now, because he will have to rest on the Saturday. Saturday is the day of God, but it's also the day in which you, your wife, your children, your animals, your servants have to rest, because only slaves don't have a day for resting. But of course, as Jesus will say, Saturday is for the man and not the man for the Saturday. So it is there to protect and enable your freedom. If you are free, you will be not slave of your remorse by killing somebody, because this cannot be repaired and you can do nothing once you do it. You will not be slave of desire. You will not be slave of lies. So if you see like that, of course, those norms, don't do false testimony, don't steal, which are also part of the criminal laws today. I mean, but you don't see them just as orders. They are examples of conducts that put you in a situation of being slave and also of enslaving your brothers and sisters in life. Because once you treat somebody as an object by killing, not honoring that person, you putting violence, or I mean, whatever, this is objectifying that person, which is basically what you do with a slave. So if you are free, you need to stay free and to protect other people's freedom. Oh, well, if you think of that, those 10 commandments turn to be 10 conditions to preserve our freedom. And now you understand what happens in Matthew 22, and I'm going to the New Testament. When somebody comes to Jesus and says, listen, what is the most important commandment? And of course, Jesus was living in a moment in which the idea, the legalistic and formalistic idea of the law was quite there in the Hebrew world. And it was basically, I would say, the dominating approach to the law. And of course, these were among the enemies that will bring Jesus to death. Today, for us Christians, to us Catholic, it is the day of the Last Supper. And tomorrow, it is the day in which Jesus will be brought to death. So it's quite moving to me to say about, to talk about this now. But basically, they were asking this to find whether Jesus was violating one of the 613 rules that every male adult Jew had to abide. And he said, listen, there are only 2 commandments. You will love the Lord with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and you will love your neighborhood as yourself. On these commandments depend all the law and all the prophets. So he's not deleting the rules. He's explaining that these are principles that embody those examples. So basically, those rules go back to being what they are, contextual determinations of a principle. And this is quite philosophical for me, because also from philosophy, what we gain is that there are principles, and principles are not rules. You cannot codify principles into a definitive set of rules that is that code, and you have all that principle written once forever. This wouldn't be a principle. We got it from the ancient Greek philosophy. The arche, the principle, is never a sum of parts. As Plato says, it's a sum of parts plus something more. That criteria that enables those parts to become part of the entire. And that's enormous, because also we are part of that entire. You cannot have a viewpoint on nothing. I mean, this is quite philosophical. I mean, you cannot catch the entire from outside of it. You can't stand from nowhere. So this means also, this is where philosophy and faith match, in my view. The impossibility of translating principles into a set of rules or norms. And this is not just an ethical standards. This is saying that these 2 principles are anytime, in any situation, for every generation, putting you in the responsibility of responding to that. And so every peculiar and particular determination that you meet into your experience, be it a law, a single behavior, a single mediation, is a way to confront yourself with those two principles, but it's not an entire way to do that. And this gives us an idea that we have to keep being humble, in a sense, and to keep bearing the responsibility of our way to deal with order. And just to move from these New Testament principles to a quite up-to-date reflection, I'm quoting from Benedict, the encyclical letter, the Spe Salvi. This is the Caritas in Veritate, the Spe Salvi. That's what Pope Benedict says about this. Every generation has the task of engaging anew in the arduous search for the right way to order human affairs. This task is never completed. Every generation must also make its own contribution in establishing convincing structures of freedom and good, which can help the following generation as a guideline for the proper use of human freedom. So, what an injustice has this Pope received by the mass media. His most famous book, Introduction to Christian Doctrine, starts with celebrating the importance of cultivating doubts, because without doubts, you wouldn't understand faith. And now we have the Panzer Cardinal, as they said in the German newspapers, that is saying that you don't have the possession of a definitive rule. Isn't that Socratic? It is, if you have the intellectual honesty of understanding without labeling. And to me, I must tell this, as a Christian, the kind of offenses that Pope Benedict had to undergo, especially because of the Western mass media, is unbearable. Still today to me, I mean. Anyway, personal opinion, but I'm not afraid of saying that. So this is where the issue of normativity matches with the issues of truth. And so I was quoting Socrates, I was quoting the Bible. Yes, what happens is that in the Christian world, there is a place where Athens and Jerusalem meet, in a sense. And I'm quoting from a philosopher, Augustine. That is the example of that, also intercultural mediation, because he belongs to the classical world. He's from Northern Africa. He's a lawyer. He's a rhetor, not a lawyer, but he's a philosopher. He wasn't Christian at the beginning. He had quite a moved life at the beginning, but he's, in a sense, both belonging to the Roman world. He's connected to the classical heritage of the Greek philosophy, but he will also become later on a Christian. So this is where Rome, Athens, and Jerusalem meet. But I would also say that being an important element of the monasteries that will, thanks to Augustine, develop in the medieval world, there is also much that we took from the Eastern world. There is a fine line that connects India with Egypt. And to me, it has to be discovered how much also the early Christians got influence from that side of the world. So globalization didn't happen only now. And also mutual and exchanges of culture were really important. But in this booklet, the Contra Academicos, Augustine, I will go fast because I don't know, how much time do I have?
Time is not so much of an issue for you,
okay,
because of the fact that because yours is I said the next session is at 9:30, so that's not so much of a problem.
Perfect. So, but I want to, to bother too much our audience, but this is an important dialogue. Also, I'm saying Augustine is, in a sense, a true mediator, and I will explain why. He mediates between these three cultures between two times, because he belongs to the Roman world. But he will also die when the Vandals were invading his city, and so at the beginning of the Middle Ages. So he's in between. He's in a threshold between worlds. And I am quoting from a dialogue here in which also he finds himself in the position of a mediator, truly as a mediator. He is close to Milan, probably, and he's walking with two pupils of him, whose names are not important, but basically that's quite important what they're saying. One, they're talking about wisdom. And one is saying that wisdom is deducing clear rules and clear conclusions from self-evident principles. So the idea is quite dogmatic. It's a presumption of possessing the truth in a way that is stable. And the other one instead is a poet. He's saying, well, no, the idea of truth is just subjective. Basically, he's a skeptical. So if there is the truth, and I don't think there is a truth, it is not a matter of being known. And if so, you cannot communicate it. So the truth does not exist. And Augustine says, listen, you don't have just to keep saying what you're thinking. Try to check whether the other one's idea is valid. Discuss with them. So he's promoting, in a sense, you can see it also as a process, in a sense, because it's quite adversarial. And he remains as a third neutral party in this moment. He's just enabling them to confront. And of course, the second pupil, the skeptical one, has quite an easy way to show that his friend is wrong. Okay, you said that you have to deduce from self-evidence. And under which premises can you say that something is self-evident? It's the devil's probation. How can you go? You just go to the infinite. How can you say that? And if I don't agree, what happens? You see, the truth does not exist, keeps saying the second pupil. And of course, the first has a good reason to say, listen, you said that the truth does not exist, but is that true or not? This is self-contradictory, of course. How can you pretend? How can you suppose that the truth does not exist and you're saying something true? You either suppose that the truth exists or you deny it, but both of them together, this is a contradiction. And they stop. And Augustine now comes in the first row and says, listen, no, you don't stop here. Because this deals with our life, with our mores. So also our, how can I say, our customs, but also it's a source of normativity. And with all our life, we cannot live it this way. And he does what a good mediator does. Listen, there is something in common in your mutual confutations, because you both said something that does not fall into contradiction. You, first pupil, showed that you cannot say that the truth does not exist because it's a contradiction. But you also showed that you cannot possess it in a stable way. So the situation that we have in front of the truth is a situation of indigence. That means a continuous research, unending research, in which the other person, but I will say also the other parts of the creation, are involved. They are all bearing questions, possible answers, and we have no definitive answer to say that somebody else is unremarkable, has to be treated as an object, because they're all bearing possible answers that you cannot exclude. So. This is, I hope, clarifying the idea of truth that the Christian doctrine is inheriting from classical philosophy, which is not an idea of possessing the truth in a stable way. This is exactly what would happen with the tablets that Moses broke. The idea of the truth is in a situation of indigence in which we all are. So this makes us, as human beings, reciprocal, one with the other, because we are all indigent and we are all necessary, one for the other. And this gives sense to our relationship, to our being connected, and also gives us the responsibility of acknowledging, of recognizing the other as the source of answers and questions, and to involve them in our research. In our, as I'm quoting again Pope Benedict, in our search for the right way of freedom and good, which is never ending, which is never done once for all. And so this means that you need to mediate between principles and rules. You have to mediate between rules, because every contextual determination of a principle can fall into conflict with another. All our legal issues have, in a sense, a conflict between laws, between rules also. How? And you need to mediate between them and their interpretation, them and the situation. This is an intermediation and a mediation that happens anytime. And of course, you have to mediate between people, because nobody is an absolute. And this is exactly what dialogos means. It is the logos, so the reason, but also the discourse that happens to be in between. And so, here's where the truth is involved. So I was starting by saying, how can we say that a Christian perspective is compatible with mediation, with that strong idea of normativity and with that strong idea of truth? And now I'm just to resume those two questions. I hope I could explain that the idea of normativity is based on principles and not on a definitive set of rules that gives us the relational, contextual, and how can I say, chronotypical responsibility of dealing with those principles in every situation. So it's not neither skeptical nor dogmatic. It's a never-ending research that requires constant activity of mediation, which is not just conflict mediation, but mediation between situations. And of course, the truth is involved, but not in a way that shows a possession of the truth. The truth is involved as something that needs to be researched. And I am quoting now once again Benedict. This is the encyclical letter Caritas in Veritate, which is, to me, it's really something that every Christian should read and reread in a sense, because there's lots of wisdom and lots of questions, basically. So basically, it's love in the truth. So the big issue is, can we, in a legitimate way, create a separation between the truth and love? Or is there a way to match them? So I'm translating because I don't have the English translation of that. But Pope Benedict says, without the truth, love, in a sense, charity, being careful, having care for, can easily fall into being sentimental. And love becomes an empty box that you can fill in with your arbitrary way. There is a fatal risk in love in a culture without truth. It is subdued to emotions, to contingent opinions of everyone. It becomes a distorted and abused word that can even become its opposite. The truth sets love free from the risk of emotivism, and also from the risk of dogmatism, of a faith that is taken away from human reason. Pay attention, there is the maximum authority of the Catholic Church that is saying you cannot separate faith from reason, because this wouldn't be faith. This would be just obeying to something. But faith has also to be reasonable in a sense. And he goes on, I'm moving a little bit, and he says, truth is in fact logos, once again, the Greek word logos. And of course, everyone who knows the beginning of the Gospel of John, in the principle, there was the logos, enarche and ologos, quoting from Greek. And the logos creates dialogos, dialogic, and then communication. And communication is therefore communion. The truth helps human beings to get out from the world of opinions and subjective sensations, and helps them to go out from their safe space and go out away and to look outside the historical and cultural determinations, and to try to find a meeting point in the evaluation of things that matter and that have a substance, because they are recognizing their value. So the truth opens and unites every reason in the logos, and opens also to a reasonable understanding of loving the other. Oh, so that's quite a big thing, in my opinion. Without the truth, there is the risk that also consent is made on ephemeral sensations, on or even pragmatical utilitarian considerations. And this is also, I'm taking from my experience as a mediator now. We all know that there are agreements that happen only because people pragmatically find a compromise. This is useful. Or it happens also that in a mediation, emotions help thrusting people towards mutual recognition, or even to taking away all the negative parts of their stories that they had inside. But then when you have to find out an agreement that works also in legal terms, you cannot just rely on emotions. And if it's just based on pragmatic utility, that's not a very solid agreement. To me, at least in my experience, the good agreements in mediations happen when there is a true acknowledgement, a true recognition that something is truly in common, that some principles are common and some contents are recognized as, in a sense, solid, as being best reasons, or at least the best reasons you could find in that situation. But if you don't have the glasses that put you in the condition to search for them, you just keep thinking on emotions or just pragmatic outcomes. That could be, in a sense, win-win. But to me, it's not that solid. In my experience, the most important mediations were, and most solid and most groundbreaking mediations, were those in which people really mutually recognized themselves, but also recognized that some contents were in common because they had no objection to them. So in a sense, there was a common research for the truth in a way that is different from the legal process, because you don't do it in an adversarial way. You don't need to do sort of cross-examination. You don't need to provide evidence in the way you do in the legal process. But in a sense, there is a research. And of course, when we lawyers also try to create the best agreement for those parties, that best agreement is the one that resists the most to confutation. And so we can say that in a sense, we can be in the truth if we agree that the truth is what is not, meets no alternative, also rationally. And to me, the truth meets no alternative because you cannot deny it. But of course, this meeting no alternative doesn't mean that you can possess it. And so you have any time also in every mediation to ask yourself, starting from a blank paper, what is the best solution for them? How can I enable them to look for that, to search for it? But this, in a sense, has to deal with the truth to me in two ways: to show them that they cannot possess it, and so they have to move from being absolute to being parts of something. They are parties because they are partial, the partiality of their position. But also to show that there is something that they can look for that is not just a matter of opinions. Maybe if it's common, it's because we recognize that it's a common good point. And this is more solid than just a compromise. So, because otherwise, you don't have any antidote, I would say, to the risk that an agreement or a compromise is ultimately based on power issues. Even when it's a compromise in which you just say, okay, let's meet an agreement because I'm not winning, you're not winning. But this is not win-win. It is just, I cannot win, you cannot win. And maybe this will happen also at the eastern border of Europe, I don't know. But this is not an agreement based on recognition, it's based just on a power issue. Also, when a power is not able to prevail, but there is no truth in that. There is no recognition of the importance of the other. There is no recognition of the sacrality of the other. There is nothing about that. So, of course, we must be also practical. We are, I mean, as lawyers, we know that you cannot always find the best reasons. You cannot always have people who say, listen, the truth is that really, this is the best solution ever. There are parts of situations in which you find compromises, of course, but. And here I found something interesting also in the gospel. Matthew 18:15-18. If your brother has a fault on you, go and solve directly. If he doesn't want, then find one or two persons as witnesses and go and bring them with you and try to solve it again. Then record to the whole community. And then, if necessary, go to the judge. Oh, alternative dispute resolution, or maybe appropriate dispute resolution in the gospel. That's interesting. I see it as a part of the principle that John Paul II was quite underlying as a very important principle in the Catholic social doctrine, which is the principle of subsidiarity. When something can be dealt by the people who are at stake, leave it to their level. Don't involve the states or an upper regulation when you can solve it through the agreement of those who are involved, through their own participation. So already from the gospel, you have an idea of subsidiarity that is in the principle of mediation. Because in a sense, all we mediators know that when we can solve it with the participation of stakeholders in their context, with a tailor-made situation for their problems, that is better than a top-down situation that is given through the necessity of involving a power and a general and abstract idea of regulation, which is the state regulation or the international regulation, whatever you call it. And again, Matthew, this is Matthew 5:20-26. Before going to make offers to the temple, go and reconcile yourself with your brother. Do it soon, or with your, if you have somebody with whom you have an issue at stake, because that person can bring you in front of a judge, and then it will be a matter of suffering. So this invitation to reconcile yourself before even attending to religious matters. That's why if you are familiar with the celebration before receiving the Holy Communion, you give the sign of the peace. Now during COVID times, you just look into the eyes of the others. And I like it actually, because it was always a little bit embarrassing. I mean, it's just my hand, your hand, no, it's me, no, it's your, it's always a bit complicated. And of course, if your neighbor has a cold, you don't really want to shake hands. I mean, I'm just kidding a little bit, but I mean, meeting the eye, reconciling yourself with those people before. Yesterday, I was in a mediation, in a mediation between a sister and two brothers. There was so much hate, so much disappointment, so many, I mean, disruptive situation about, and the issue was not only money. There was an issue of money, of course, but it's also dealing with recognition and things, and other issues that happen within families, of course, you know, symbolic values related to money, because of course value can be given also to the symbolic use of money, and then it's enormous, because then 10 cents can become the enormous, have the enormous value of being discriminated in front of your brothers and sisters or whatever. And I was thinking, I mean, they have been fighting for years. What if you read this and say, before going to church, maybe they go, I don't know, go and reconcile yourself with your brother before you go in front of a judge? Isn't that powerful? Maybe lawyers don't like it, but the good news is that people need lawyers and mediators also to reconcile themselves. Because, of course, there are many levels. Of course, the principle of subsidiarity. Just moving towards the end of this conversation, by saying something that I hope can be useful in this sense. Well, how can I describe a mediator according to what I read in the Old and New Testament? To me, symbolically, we are those who plant the tents in the desert and invite people inside the tent to find an alliance, to find an agreement. And we know that it isn't necessarily a definitive one. Then you have to remove the tent and plant another and just walk through the desert, through the many deserts of human life. Also our deserts, I mean, we have them as well. And this means that if you enter this perspective, you have a dialogical idea of truth and a dialogical idea of normativity, of ethics. So let's go back to my initial question. Why does Jesus say, I am here to divide? That was my initial question. I give you my answer, because anytime in your human experience, but also in your experience as a mediator, as a lawyer, as a professional, you have to choose the kind of world you want to live in, the kind of world you want to contribute to. And this involves your personal responsibility. And this is no and, it is an either or. You cannot serve God and mammon. No, you cannot serve God and money. You cannot serve God and whatever. If you recognize those two principles, they are binding you to a constant research and a constant relational and responsible research. And this creates division, and this creates prosecution. Socrates, as we said the other time, was sentenced to death, and he was innocent. And wasn't Jesus also sentenced to death, and he was innocent? And funny enough, they didn't both. They accepted, and accepting that sentence doesn't mean justifying it. It is keeping being the symbol that human injustice will always be there. And we are always called to ask ourselves who we are in front of that injustice. So that's to me one of the most important provocation of a Christian perspective into the world of law and mediation. And there is another final remark. Because I've been quite philosophical, but this isn't only that. If you read through the gospel, you see that Jesus is quite also practical in meeting the needs of the people, providing wine to a wedding ceremony, spitting on the mud and saving with that physical element, giving back the sight of a blind man, bringing back to being not sentenced to death the woman. Nobody is condemning you. I'm not condemning you. This is quite physical. Feeling the touch of the woman who had problems of blood flows and said, who touched me? I mean, you're in the middle of a cry. Somebody touched me, in a sense of asking me something in terms of faith. So there is an attention in the eyes of Jesus that is neither sentimental and not just intellectual. So this is the first point. Love God with all your mind, with all your body, with all your soul, with all of them. And matching mind, body, and soul is one of the most difficult mediations that every person has to do in life. To me, it is. I'm always a bit in conflict with those elements. And I'm sure that I need to mediate also between myself sometimes, you know. And I think that so many pieces in the Bible and in the gospel especially show that God is moved also by human sufferings. Like a mother's womb, there is Jesus crying also sometimes. And this is showing also the fact that God is not a stranger to the contradictions and to the sufferings of humanity. And in fact, and this is the final remark that is back a little bit philosophical. It is incredible figure of Jesus being human and being God at the same time, which is not a matter of being, I mean, polytheistic. We already heard in the Old Testament that this God had to be named 3 times. I am who I am Elohim, I'm walking with you, I am. And probably when Jesus replied in front of the Hebrews, are you the Son of God? Yes, I am. He said exactly Yahweh. That was exactly what gave them the legal reasons to sentence him to death, because only the priests could say that in the Saturday. So, but this is another legal issue about the process on Jesus. That's not the thing I want to talk about. That's incredible. The figure of Jesus also theoretically shows that a human body is able to host God in terms of intelligence and in terms of sensibility, which doesn't mean that each one of us is called to be God. No, it is not self-divinizing. This is idolatry, of course. But to me, it's providing every human being with the possibility of being considered as a host of God. And so a sacrality that involves us in an enormous respect. That involves also the respect for other faiths, for other ideas, opinion, and so on. This idea of relational truth that I explained is not an idea that, I mean, takes away respect. It's embodied in respect. And to me, this is something that also affects my experience as a mediator. Of course, as a professor of philosophy of law and as a lawyer, I'm not bringing my faith in the room anytime. Of course, I cannot do it. I need to be scientifical in the academia, and I need to be, in a sense, also professional. But I don't see a conflict between these principles and being professional. Because as I said, God works in mysterious ways. And there are 2 prayers that I would like to end my presentation with that I frequently say, and sometimes I say it also before entering a mediation or before doing a lecture, which is, please show me your ways, which is one. And the second one is, please give me the wisdom of the heart. Because we bear the responsibility of how we use our talents, how we use our limited resources, also in helping conflicts to find a solution, or at least to find a way not to surrender to violence. And so to me, this is the place where faith and reasons are not in conflict, but are, as Pope John Paul II said, are 2 wings that help you to fly, towards the sky. So this is the end of my presentation, and I thank you for your patience and for your attention. And of course, if there are questions, I'm here.
No, thank you very much, Federico. An interesting aspect that you have brought in. But only thing is that when we say spirituality and you talk about religion, so you connecting the 2, are you saying the same thing, or are they spirituality different from what you brought in from religion?
Well, they can be separated. They shouldn't be separated if you are a believer. I mean, of course, being a philosopher, my approach to this matter was quite intellectual, because I didn't want to bring my own spirituality. But in the end, that's what I said. Those prayers, in a sense, are 2 very small sentences that enable me to connect also with the spiritual side of this wisdom. So to me, much of spirituality is being in contact with the wisdom that I received from my parents, from my grandparents, and from more than 2,000 years of Christianity, and even more of biblical wisdom, and so on and so on. So there is much of, there is culture, there is religion, of course, but religion without spirituality is just like norms without soul. I mean, you need both of them. But of course, I'm also saying that spirituality is, in my view, needs also some clarity, because especially in these postmodern times in the Western world, you are in a little bit of a supermarket of the faith, in which you pick up here and there and just create your own religion to what is most comfortable to your way of life. But this isn't creating an idol, maybe. I don't know. To me, much of spirituality is also recognizes that I'm not creating the truth. I'm receiving it. And this is where philosophy and spirituality match. But I'm not sure I answered your question.
No, because interestingly, what happened was that I started a series called Mediators, Mediation, and Spirituality. And the first meeting, we had people from all over the world. And I asked them the same question: what do you think is spirituality? And no one connected it to religion. So because you've connected it to religion, so I'm just asking, because I'm asking you, that's why. Up till now, whenever I've had these discussions, no one has really connected it, saying this is something else and it is a power or whatever. I mean, everyone had that. I'll send you the link. I hope you can find it on my website also. The link is there. So that's one way of looking at it. So I don't know. That's why I was asking you.
But that's very common, especially in the Western world now, because there is a huge movement of getting away from organized religions, because in a sense it is seen as a dogmatic way of dealing with spirituality. And also there is a refusal also of the normative side of things, because in a sense, if you adopt a religion, you have also a certain set of rules. But if this is really a superficial way to deal with religion. And of course, it's also a responsibility of those who are adopting a certain religious viewpoint, not to be just, lawyers in being religious, because that is a risk, of course. I am religious because I'm abiding my laws. I don't see it that way.
Because also I think the way maybe in religion, because there has been interpretation over interpretation, and the words have maybe the meaning has changed, and people have taken up as they want to take it up and used it the way they want to use it. So maybe that's why people had to maybe move away from religion, because maybe they didn't accept the certain interpretation that was handed down to them. Could be. I don't know. I mean, these are, of course, things we'll have to.
But also, on the other hand, you need to study. I mean, I told you that I came back to religion thanks to my studies, in a sense. And that's true, because when I got to the level of understanding that in my religion, I mean, there was lots of wisdom, and also that it matched some of my philosophical questions, then, of course, I understood that I was walking with my children's shoes. I mean, I had grown up as an adult, and I kept my shoes as a child in terms of faith. So they were not matching. I'll give you an example. There is always this piece of the gospel that I never understood before I got an interpretation that can make sense. But there are many ways, and you have to keep starting. Why does Jesus ask 3 times to Peter after the resurrection? Do you love me, Peter? Yes, I do. Do you love me? Yes, I do. Do you love me? Yes, I do. And that's meaningless. 3 times. That's because 3 times Peter has betrayed Jesus during the... No. Go to the Greek translation, and you understand that they are using 2 different verbs. Agapas me Petre, and this is agape, and Peter replies phileos. So it's like, I am your friend. In Italian, there is this difference. It's hard to say it in English, but it's not the same thing. Agape, eros, and philia. There are 3 kinds of love. And of course, Jesus was asking something more, and Peter was saying, well, I'm your friend, but do you love me? Well, I'm your friend. And only at the 3rd time, well, And only when Peter recognized his limits, then he was confirmed. That's interesting. So there is, at that threshold between those 2 meanings, but you cannot understand it if you don't start studying, understanding, and getting to the Greek text and whatever. So when I'm saying there is much wisdom, you also need to study a lot.
Exactly. It's the language. It's the language part of it, to be able to have that skill of that language, and to be able to also look at it objectively. Both those aspects together, then you will really bring out something which, of course, will be your interpretation, definitely, but I think you will be more satisfied because you've gone into the root of it. Maybe that's why.
But it's not just interpretation, it is culture, Vikram, because I mean, we have 2,000 years of people that are probably more intelligent than I am. So I don't have the presumption to hear the gospel and find an answer and create my own religion. No, let's read what the fathers of the church said. Let's just read to Augustine. That's what I like in the Catholic Church, actually. That is not just, hey, listen, I'm reading this and Jesus said that. Jesus said, no. There is 2,000 years of wisdom, 2,000 years of people who, I mean, I cannot find a word that is not rude, but worked very hard to understand. And you are connected with that wisdom. You are not an absolute. Go back to that.
But also, Federico, you haven't thrown light on the soul.
On the soul. What do you mean by that?
What is your
What would you like?
understanding of the, what is your understanding of the soul, and where is it connected in terms of mediation?
In many different ways. How can I say? It's, as I said, it is not just mind and body. There is the soul. So what is the soul? Hard to say, but it's just the mind. So there is not just an intellectual element, and it's just not just a physical element. To me, in a sense, the soul is what is mostly, in a sense, mine and not mine, because my soul is probably the most intimate part of myself, and what I hope that will survive my body, my material life. But in a sense, it's not only mine, because my soul, as my life, in a sense, is being shaped by all the people that I meet, by all my experiences, and by the other souls that I meet. And like in a symphony, so you know that I'm also a musician, so there is much of metaphors that I take from music, of resonance that can happen and then can enrich your soul. So and of course, in a sense, you can also bring your soul into the mediation room in two ways, to me at least. Once you see the other people as other souls, so other lives, other stories, and you honor them. And you honor them with all your attention, with all your energies, and you don't try to label them into roles. Once you see them as souls, they're not just bodies, they're not just clients, they're not just roles being played. There's always something transcending those masks, those roles, those rules. There is something transcending, and this involves, to me, much respect. And this is the first element. So this mystery that each one of us is carrying. And so meeting with another person is meeting with another soul with a portion of mystery. And that's, to me, the spiritual part. And the second is being responsible of the fact that you're helping a peace process. That affects the souls of all the people who are, from a religious viewpoint also, because if conflicts goes on, it's a sort of poison that is poisoning those lives and the relationships. So in a sense, that involves also the spiritual part.
But Federico, does Christianity talk about the soul? Is there some discussion there?
Of course.
What is the kind of, what comes out for you in terms of, just, in a brief thing, if you want to talk about it, what comes out from there?
Well, to me, of course, being Christian is not just a matter of rituals or applying rules. Of course, it's like crossing a desert of life in search for the promised land, if you keep that metaphor. And so your relationship with God and your relationship with your neighborhood is involved in that. And it is a meeting of souls, in a sense. Life is a meeting of souls. And of course, in your experience as a Christian, your personal evolution is shaped by those meetings and by how those meetings affect you. Also, when you, for instance, examine your conscience and think of how you have been interacting in your relationships. Have you, and that is also not just spiritual, but it's involving your ethical responsibility. They're all elements that match one with the other. And of course, if you put it in more, let's say, spiritual terms, going to the soul element involves a way of listening that is deeper than the kind of listening that you do only with your mind or with your body. So that's also important in a mediation room. If you see that person as unique and as bearer of questions and answers, this involves a deeper listening, a deeper understanding. Of course, you cannot do it always, but it can affect your practice, but also your perspective in life.
Because I mean, why I was looking at that was because when you say, I mean, the connecting of souls, there's some discussion on that, because energy, we use the word energy. So what is that energy, as we call it? I mean, those aspects also, I mean, we maybe needed to also discuss those, because what is energy when we say that the energy that you bring in? I mean, when you just we use it very casually, but has there been more thoughts that you've put into that energy?
Well, I am the son of a scientist. My father is a physics. So I'm always quite careful in dealing with the borderline between philosophy and science, because having, a scientist in my house is a problem. But he's a believer, strange enough. He's and he's one of the rare, and also one of his mentors was one of the most famous astrophysicists in Italy, who was also involved in the reconciliation between the church and the scientific world around the figure of Galileo Galilei, whose table and whose is exactly in the university where I teach, because exactly in the first floor of Padova University, at the Palace of Bo, exactly where I teach, there was also Galileo Galilei. So that's quite a responsibility, Anyway, what is interesting from my viewpoint, which is humble and so on, it is interesting that energy and materiality are no longer opposite. I mean, we know that stuff and material is made of energy. So I don't see a contradiction between an intellectual creation performed by an energy. So but of course, the second point is that I think that science and religion and spirituality have different questions and different perspectives. So they're not necessarily conflicting one with the other, but it's a mistake to say that science has demonstrated that religion is wrong or the opposite, because they're totally asking different questions. About energy, I'm quite skeptical about the use of the word energy, especially with the risk that we are using it in a new age way that is not, I'm not familiar with it, and I don't like it actually. What can I say? I prefer to think about connection in a sense. And to me, connection happens through many different ways. I mean, through words, through eyes that meet, through perceptions, through instincts, all the elements that also you bring at a mediation table. Start to quote them as energy or whatever, doesn't lead me to anywhere, but I prefer to bring them to the fact that this connection between diversity is one of the elements that characterize the Logos. And in the beginning of the Gospel of John, God is Logos. God is a connection between, the Trinity is a connection. So in a sense, once you enter in resonance with another person, and you're not doing in a way that is violent, you're within the Logos. You're not possessing the Logos, but you're resonating. Like, when I pressed the C key in the piano, also the E, the G, and the B are resonating with that, if it's fine-tuned, exactly like that. So you can be resonating with the Logos once you act within the Logos. And this has much to do with the connection. And you can do it at an intellectual level, at a spiritual level, at different levels. But by connecting with others, by honoring their presence and trying to connect with their unicity, you are within the Logos in a sense.
The only thing is that you don't have to worry about your father today, because you haven't brought the young Federico with you. Why is the young Federico not with us today? The one that is behind you, with the one that was behind you last time.
Oh no, because now I'm guest of my parents actually in the mountains. I'm here in South Tyrol, so
you should have shown us that Federico. You should have shown us the mountains.
The mountains, you cannot see them actually, but imagine the wonderful Dolomiti mountains. If you Google, what I see from here is the Odle group. The guys.
Where are you right now? Which place?
Well, in South Tyrol, close to the closest town is called Brixen or Klausen in German, because everybody speaks German here. We are within the Italian minority of this town. I mean, but that's we need to mediate also here between languages, of course. So, but it's a wonderful place. I'm here for Easter, of course, and here I also, being back to the spiritual side, I go to a Franciscan church in Brixton. There's a wonderful community that's bilingual also, and our spiritual father comes from Germany. So that's a mixture of elements, you know.
Because I think, why the energy aspect I was asking you, because energy, soul, spirituality, and of course the heart, yes, but all these elements, I mean, is there something that we can work out a correlation there? I mean, as discussion goes on, I mean, I'm just saying that these are things which I want that people to bring out, those aspects, because certain words are just used, like I said, energy is used, but is there something beyond that someone has really put their mind to and connected it to maybe spirituality or whatever else? So those are things that we will bring out. Hopefully something comes out of that. So it was, of course, really interesting, Federico.
Thank you.
And of course, we'll maybe at the, okay, so on the last day, on the 29th, we'll just have one session on learnings and key takeaways. So please be part of that. There'll be two of them, one at 11 o'clock in the morning, the other at 7 o'clock in the evening, because the people from Australia and all that, those people, them, we can do a earlier one. So please be part of that.
I will really try to do. I'm a bit sorry because I couldn't join many sessions, but these are really busy days at the university. But I will try my best, really, because these are the things you're organizing here are really interesting, and they are really connecting people, souls, I can say that, and ideas in a way that is quite precious. And this connection, I find it very precious in a moment in which, especially Europe, is threatened by war. It is showing that we can step in a different world, that we can work for another world. And what you're doing here is quite important. And I want personally to thank you for this, because you're putting so much energy in the best way. I like to talk about energy in this, so much effort. And I really hope that these kind of connections can, in a sense, like, you know, a stone in the water, create a sort of other resonances and create that effect. And that can be groundbreaking by keeping its peacefulness. And really, thank you, Vikram, for that. That's precious. So thank you.
Thank you very much. But you must listen to Ken Cloke is coming in.
Absolutely.
In about an hour. So please listen into that. And if you want to drop in, please drop in. The link remains the same.
The link remains. So now I'm closing this connection. I will drop in later. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Wonderful. So perfect. So thank you very much, Federico. And
thank you.
I'll see you a little later in the day.
See you later.
All right.